Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm going to go through some analysis here of where AT&T is at, where HBO Max is at, where DC Comics are at, and try and explain at least a couple of the moving parts that go on here. Because it's in many things, and especially right now in business, and when you have transformative business, it's very easy to take one data point and say, this is the world, this is what things look like, and lead yourself to some very wrong conclusions. None of us know what the future will hold. None of us know exactly how all this is going to shake and play out, but we do know the various bets that are being played right now. One of the most valuable things that people are chasing is that they want to create a subscriber business around entertainment. And this has been going on for a while. You saw Netflix really take hold and push on this. In fact, if you do a little bit of historical research and you go back to, say, 2015, even, just 5 years ago, you still see a lot of big analysts talking about Netflix's model being unproven and if it was actually going to be sustainable and how it would fend off, if they basically were saying that the big power was still with the studios who would be able to leverage theaters and could slow down their delivery of content to Netflix, which would force Netflix into having to do their own things, but without necessarily the channel of the theater. And this was going to definitely hamper their growth. It's fascinating to look at that now in 2020, where we see that the value is in creating content. But basically now about 2 years ago, AT&T buys Warner Media. And there was a lot of speculation about what they'd do with this, and a lot of kind of confusion about what a game AT&T was trying to play. But it's pretty clear at this point. AT&T for a long time has feared being seen as a cable and landline company, a network provider. Now, why would AT&T be worried about that? Because any big corporation is going to get valued poorly on being a pure commodity. And right now, if you are going to buy a phone, if you look at that thing that's in your pocket or in your hand right now, it's not an AT&T phone. It's not a Verizon phone. It's not a Sprint phone. It's an iPhone or it's an Android phone or whatever it happens to be. Your loyalty to that thing you're holding is to the maker. It's to Apple. And as much as AT&T and Verizon and others have tried to push the narrative that their network is strongest or their network is fastest or whatever else, for the vast majority of people, the quality of the network is really dependent on where you live. Is there a cell tower near you? Does it have 5G? That's the person you like. If you move and suddenly your amazing AT&T service that you've used for the last 15 years starts to suck, but Verizon's good, you're probably going to switch. And AT&T knows this. Verizon knows this. They all know this. And so that makes them a kind of a middleman, a commodity, where they're not in charge of the device and they're not in charge of the entertainment on that device. And they're the transport in the middle. And as a result, they're very easily replaceable. That's why a few years ago, several years ago now, AT&T bought DirecTV. They did that because they wanted to start to play in the content business. They looked at things and said, can we get into the device manufacturing business? And that would mean going to compete with LG and Samsung and Apple and Google and a bunch of people that felt like getting into the hardware business at that stage was going to be incredibly difficult for them. Getting into the content business made a lot more sense. Okay, if they control the pipe and they control what's going down the pipe, then that gives them a lot of power. That gives them at least two-thirds of the equation. And then they basically then look at it and say, hey, we're controlling the entertainment. We're controlling what's going down the pipe, and we're going to make the device on the other end dumb. And people at AT&T looked at this and said, yeah, the world's going to move that way anyway. People are going to start to look at their screens as ubiquitous. They're going to look at, they've got a big flat panel screen in their home, and they've got a tablet, and they've got a phone. And the odds of any one manufacturer, like Apple or LG or Samsung, owning all of those things is unlikely. Now, they're definitely going to go fight, and they're going to spend billions of dollars trying to make that happen. But still, it's going to be tough for somebody to win in that fight. And so that's not a battle we want to put ourselves into, because we're coming in from behind, and there's pretty much zero chance they can catch up and be a screen provider, a hardware provider across all those other places. Plus, they knew that that would put them in a bad position where every year they've got to convince people to go out and buy a new phone. This is something that if you look at Apple's stock price and what they get rated poorly about, that's something that they struggle with. This idea that every year you've got to sell somebody a new iPhone every 2 years, and eventually, like the camera just gets good enough where people won't do it, and that's what people worry about. Analysts worry about for their events. So they went down the path of entertainment. They bought DirecTV. They pushed into that, and then quickly they realized that DirecTV was not enough and that they needed to go further. That's where the Warner Media acquisition came in, and that's where you've seen them pivot and align a lot of what they've done. Now, AT&T would never admit this and shouldn't, but this pandemic and shutting down the theaters and everything else is actually beneficial to them for finally exerting some leverage over the content they have. Warner Media controls a lot of entertainment properties, a lot of content. I don't know, I want to say second only to Disney, because I'm not sure that's a good way to look at the world, but they're a very strong power player now in first-run movies and in entertainment properties. And so they look at that and they say, finally, there's an advantage. Finally, there's a way where we can beat Netflix. We have content and stars and properties that they don't have. We have this channel with the theaters of big blockbuster movies, and it's going to take 2 to 3 years for the marketing to wear off with that. And so this is an idea that we can roll this into this streaming service, this HBO Max streaming service, which has issues, no doubt about it. The UI is absolutely terrible. It's expensive, and there's lots of problems with it. But this streaming service, I think it's currently hovering at just under 30 million total subscribers. They're hoping to basically use this Wonder Woman movie launch to get somewhere between 25 million more. They're looking for this to be a huge bump. Can they do that? Probably not, but that's kind of their goal. And so then you get to DC, because one of the comments that's being made right now is that DC, and this exact sentence, Stanky, who is our head of AT&T, basically, it's a terrible name, but anyway, it says, during Tuesday's video appearance, sat in front of a screen showing an AT&T 5G logo and the HBO Max logo, and said his team has done a great job restructuring our debt over the past few months and will shed tangential assets that may cause distractions for the core focus of the company. So people are taking that sentence and they're going, they're going to get rid of DC. But probably not. And I say that purely because if you look at their play, if you look about serving up entertainment properties and what's going to be the feeding ground for a lot of this content. One area that Netflix has struggled with, and that's why you saw them, purchase Miller World and look for more of this, is they need a feeding ground. They need a cheap way of both inserting new IP into movies that are getting made and marketing that stuff out the other end. The comic book business represents a very cheap way to market properties and to also get IP into the company. And when I say cheap, it is a rounding error in all of AT&T's properties. Now, when I say that, a lot of people object and say, there's really this pull of people saying that AT&T is going to dump DC, but it's highly unlikely because it does fit into the core strategy. It does create marketing and assets for DC in general as a company. And if you say, well, wait a minute, they're not in the business of producing comic books. Yes, but they are in the business of producing marketing. Marketing that goes digitally, marketing that's printed. And that's what DC Comics largely is. Now, I don't say that out of malice. I don't say that out of happiness. It's just kind of a fact. It's just a thing. And it's important to bring up at this point that DC, I'm in everything I just said, notice I didn't say that AT&T really wants like the best comic creators to come in and tell amazing comic stories that are going to sell big numbers of graphic novels. You would never hear that statement within AT&T because that's not their goal. But their goal is to have a business that's spinning off ideas and spinning off properties and getting things queued up that if it hits and if it does well and it can help complement the larger HBO Max and entertainment play, then they will do that. And another thing they are thinking about, as much as I think a lot of listeners in this channel absolutely hate it, they are thinking about this world where they will have digital content, books, comic books, media that can be part of this overall entertainment service. So far, we've seen streaming services be just movies, but also in that portfolio from earlier slides we saw from AT&T, they're thinking about ebooks, digital graphic novels, games, anything that can be delivered digitally from one place to another is in that bucket. So this is their strategy. This is how it's going to play out. The giant threat, and I've said this before on other shows, and I'll say it here, the huge threat for DC Comics at this point is not AT&T gets tired of producing comics, because they're unlikely to. The big threat is that HBO Max flops. That over the next year, all the expected subscribers that are going to come into the picture because of them running first-rate movies does not happen. Maybe the pandemic ends earlier and people go back to theaters. Maybe a lot of these movies that come out bomb and nobody wants to watch them. Maybe people tune in and Wonder Woman is so terrible of a movie that they just decide, I'm not going to subscribe to this regularly, and they cut their cancellation. They say, I'm good with Netflix. Netflix has enough for me. That's the threat to DC, because if that happens, then absolutely all the benefits that the comic line has right now go away. As I said, AT&T is not enamored at publishing comics, but they are going to keep doing it because it serves this strategy. If the strategy fails, the comic books go with it. And that is not going to play out in the next 6 months. It's not even going to play out likely in the next 2 years. This battle is going to be waged throughout 2021, 22, and probably 23. And sometime around 23 or 24, we're going to look at this and say, okay, what is the landscape of streaming services? Is it Netflix and HBO Max and maybe Amazon Prime? Are those the big players? If that's the world we're living in, then they're going to happily and cheerfully keep producing comics. If, on the other hand, HBO Max never gets anywhere and is hovering around Hulu numbers or Apple TV numbers, they'll dramatically pull back, and it will become much more of an archival library, and they're going to stop producing a lot of the new shows, and they're going to stop spending money there, and DC will suffer very, very quickly. They'll get sold off. I mean, maybe that's the world where Disney buys DC. Who knows? But today, the properties, the licensed brands, all that kind of stuff is very, very valuable, and that will keep comics being made. This is not me going, yay, the industry's good. Whenever I say stuff like this, there's somebody in the comments like, oh, so you're saying everything's perfect in the industry. I don't know. Did anything I just said over the last 10 minutes sound perfect? Like as a comic fan reader, ugh, I don't know. It's hard for me to get up in the morning and say, all right, I'm excited about this company that's an offshoot of a media streaming business. Yay. That said, there will be some good stories that will come out. There will be some bad stories that will come out. In many ways, the world probably going to look a lot like it's looked for the last 20 years, just with more synergy. Wes Overthinking Critical has started calling this the gentrification of the comic industry, and sadly, that's not the worst analogy in the world. Probably pretty dead on. But that's the battle to watch, and that's what we're looking at. So, is this an exciting one? I don't know. Can we stay riveted to this battle forever? We'll give it a shot together. Otherwise, we're going to do a lot more retrospectives and things. Yeah, that's exciting too. Hey, do you have questions, thoughts, disagreements, arguments? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Thank you, everyone, for the support you've given this channel, and thanks for listening.